I want to be clear where I stand tonight, and unfortunately, I think that, Michael, it's a slightly nuanced position. It doesn't totally answer that question in a very clear way. The first thing I want to say is, I support the leader's decision in Greater Manchester to do business with the current government. From my perspective, in an era of Tory government, this is the only way we have some opportunity to deliver some progressive values in our conurbation. I also believe that this country has been run in an over-centralised way for far too long. And we all know we need a rebalancing of the economy, but we also need a rebalancing of political power in this country if we're to fulfil our potential, indeed if we're to be a democratic country. But I do have a very significant number of concerns. The first concern I have is at the moment this is an elite project remote from the people of Greater Manchester. And if you set elite projects up, and if it remains remote from the people of Greater Manchester, they will turn away from mainstream politicians ultimately. And everybody on this panel who is a mainstream politician or in the audience who believes in mainstream politics should be incredibly concerned that the public on the whole feel locked out from this project. As, by the way, do many people in the political parties as local councillors and members. So in my view, one of the big challenges for the politicians and for the new elected mayor is to change that and to change it very, very quickly. From my perspective, this project at the moment feels very technocratic and managerial as well. Where is the progressive vision? Where is the progressive mission? Whatever that is, I believe it should be about tackling inequality. Sean may have different political views about what should be at the heart of this project, but it cannot be a technocratic managerial project. It has to have a clear vision and a clear mission at the heart of it. And for me, that has to be about tackling inequality, reconnecting social justice with growth, and a progressive project. I also think another element of this project, meeting in this great building here in the centre of Manchester, we have to be very conscious of. Devolution has to benefit all parts of Greater Manchester. If people in every part of Greater Manchester don't feel they're getting tangible benefits, tangible advances, whether it's skills or transport or health or social care, they will turn against this project very, very quickly. So it has to be a project, strategic level decisions, yes, but it has to deliver for every part of Greater Manchester. And finally, this project takes place in the context of Tory cuts and Tory ideology. Of course, some of that is difficult choices that have been made as a consequence of the financial crisis, but some of it is deeply ideological. It's an attack on the state. It's a view that a withered state, a diminished state, is leads to a healthier country. Well, I, from a progressive values point of view, don't share that analysis. So it also takes place against that background. And in terms of the existing devolution deal, there's been a series of deals done, I believe, that has resulted in a number of flaws. The first flaw is health and social care. I was the first minister in any government to propose the integration of health and social care. I totally believe that if you want to move to a well-being service from a sickness service, if you want to move to prevention and early intervention, if you want to deal with the challenges of an ageing society, you have to integrate not just health and social care, by the way, but all of the range of community services. However, the transformation fund that has been made available, the £450 million, in the context of a £2 billion black hole in the NHS, social care budgets being slashed and burned, is totally inadequate. And at the very least, we should be demanding that that transformation fund be £1 billion. We've also signed up to upskilling our population. I totally agree. One of the top priorities. If we're going to attract the jobs of the future, the technological jobs and the green jobs, and we want people living in Greater Manchester to benefit from those jobs, we have to upskill our population. But the only power the government has given is over 19-plus education. Everybody in this room knows we have to invest in the early years, where you make the most difference in terms of a child's life. A lot of those services are being slashed. We have no traction over school improvement. We have no traction over apprenticeships, and yet we are signing up to a deal which says we will upskill our population. My view is that is being set up to fail. And what I want to see us demand is that, first of all, responsibility for school improvement should be devolved, that there should be a Greater Manchester Schools Challenge on a par with London, where a vast amount of resource was put into supporting those schools that were struggling in London in return for a reform agenda. Very, very important. And on top of that, I believe forced academisation will actually be detrimental to upskilling the population in Greater Manchester and creating a distinct 14 to 19 phase of education with a high quality vocational offer at the heart of it. So that's another example where we need a different and a better and a fairer deal. And then there's the question of business rates. Of course, in principle, retaining 100% of business rate revenue is an advance. But that happened at the same time as the government said a whole swathe of businesses were going to be exempt from paying business rates. And in addition to that, we all know there are many parts of Greater Manchester that don't actually benefit compared to others very much in terms of that business rate revenue. So there has to be transitional arrangements to make sure that that doesn't end up actually with more losers than winners and accentuating inequality rather than reducing inequality. And finally, in terms of flaws, I personally think that the bids we've made to government for town centre and district centre regeneration that have been rejected time and time again are very important in terms of this project. They're important in terms of economic growth, but they're equally important in terms of civic pride. And it's back to my point. If people don't see the tangible benefits in their communities, and one of those tangible benefits that people make judgments how they feel about their identity in their community are district and town centres, then I think that that is another weakness. So what are some of the solutions? Well, first of all, we have to recognise, therefore, we need more powers, we need more fiscal devolution, and we need more investment if we're to create a world-class Greater Manchester. And I believe the first responsibility of the new mayor, I have a slight interest in this, by the way, the first responsibility of the new mayor, with a mandate from the people of Greater Manchester, is to mobilise and galvanise the people of Greater Manchester around the concept of a fairer deal in relation to health, in relation to education, as I've said, and in relation to other matters. Secondly, we have to put a progressive project at the heart of this devolution project from a Labour perspective. And I believe that that should be about tackling inequality. It should be about reconnecting growth with social justice. And when I talk about inequality, I mean inequality of income. Our pay lags behind the rest of the country in a totally unacceptable way. We should aim to lead the country, as the Chamber of Commerce has said, on paying a proper living wage, not, by the way, a souped-up minimum wage. In terms of opportunity, inequality of opportunity, of course I'm proud as a Mancunian. I'm a Bury guy, but I'm proud of the fact that over the last 25 years we've seen the renaissance of this city. And we should all be proud of it. But when 40% of kids are living in poverty in this city, that is nothing to celebrate. And when 25% of kids are living in Greater Manchester are living in poverty, that is nothing to celebrate. So we also have to have a focus, in my view, on tackling child poverty and giving young people access to the opportunities, particularly working class young people who are still locked out of internships and work experience opportunities, as well as improving school attainment, the issues that I raised earlier. And then inequality of power. Look, when you saw that photograph of the 11 white men with George Osborne, it should have sent a shiver down your spine. There are many talented women and people from BAME communities in all political parties in this conurbation. And we cannot go on like this, both in terms of our political leadership and our political elite. I'm proud of the fact, by the way, in Bury, we're to have the first BAME leader of a council in May. That is a great achievement, and I'm really proud of that. But we have to change the culture in the way we do politics. And our political institutions and our public service institutions have to look like the communities that we seek to serve. And by the way, not just on the front line, but in senior management teams and leadership positions as well. It's not politically correct. It's about saying if we continue to squander the talent of so many people in our conurbation, we will not be world class, and we will also not get decisions right. If you do not have a broad base of people with different experiences from different backgrounds contributing towards making decisions, you end up with flawed decision-making processes. And I should know, because Parliament is riddled with what I describe as the special advisor class. Many of them very talented, many of them very able, but far too narrow a background in terms of their life experiences and their political involvement. And finally, in terms of solutions, I think the new elected mayor, working with the new cabinet, has got to set out economic and social renewal which will benefit every part of Greater Manchester. Every district and every city has to see tangible gains over a reasonable period of time as a consequence of the Greater Manchester project. Sue, how are we doing for time?
8 minutes, 8 seconds.
Right, and then the final point I would make is about the Northern Powerhouse. Let me be clear about this. It can be whatever you want it to be. Because at the moment, it is a pretty hollow, meaningless phrase. Okay, that sounds incredibly negative, doesn't it? But this is a massive opportunity. We should be working with Merseyside, we should be working with Yorkshire, we should be working with the North East, and we should be defining what a Northern Powerhouse can deliver in terms of improving productivity, in terms of reconnecting social justice with economic growth, in terms of connectivity and infrastructure. And if we together could define that Northern Powerhouse. That would give us a much more powerful voice in terms of walking through that door and negotiating with George Osborne. But if we are not clear about our priorities, if we're not clear about our project, if we're not clear about what would make the most difference in terms of economic and social renewal, this agenda will continue to be dictated to by the government and by the Treasury. So on the one hand, this deal is far from perfect. On the other, the leaders were right to take it, but I believe the election of a new mayor is the big opportunity to actually create a project that would really mean a world-class Greater Manchester. And for me, that means leading the world in tackling and challenging inequality. Thank you very much.